You are listening to the Stetson Students Podcast, where we post all of the series and messages from our student ministry. We are a ministry connected to Stetson Baptist Church, where we are for DeLand and for Jesus. If you would like to learn anything more about our ministries, please check out our social medias or go to stetsonbaptistchurch.org.
Hi, I'm Lindsay McNabb, and I'm in 8th grade, and I go to Stetson Baptist Christian School, and I'll be reading the verse for you guys today. It's Mark 8:34 through 37, and it says, "And calling the crowd to him with his disciples, he said to them, 'If anyone would come after me, let him deny himself and take up his cross and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in return for his soul?'"
You can take it back. Yeah. Great. Yep. All right, man. What a crazy night it's already been. How's everybody doing tonight? Pretty good? Is anybody tired? Anybody tired? I'm tired. You're tired? You're done with school. Why are you tired? Listen. Who here is done with school? Anybody in the room? Okay. We got a few over here. Wow. More than I thought. Who in here has another week of school? At least a week. What about 2 weeks? Wow. Anybody 3 weeks? Same. Oh, forever. Is that homeschool? Yeah. I'm sorry. No, but you listen. Sometimes your school is better, right? Like you get to go places, to parks, and every Friday. Yeah. Look at that. So there you go. My kids is like, what am I doing? I want to go every Friday. No, that's cool. Well, awesome. Well, if you were here last week, we started a series called Fans and Followers, the Cost of Christianity. And man, we had a really good time just talking about what is the difference between a fan and a follower. And before I give you those definitions, if you would like to take notes, just slip your hand up in the air. We'll be bringing some notepads and a pen to you. But last week, we kind of talked about what's the difference between a fan and a follower, and really using that to illustrate our relationship with Jesus. Are we fans of Jesus or are we followers of Jesus? And just so you can kind of see the definitions we're walking into today. And if you weren't here last week, you're not missing it. You're gonna be fine. You're not missing anything. This is really all you need to know, is that we believe that a follower is loyal and deeply affected by the life and success of what they follow, while a fan simply enjoys what they are supporting. When things get difficult or change, it has little to no impact on them. So if you can see, a follower is a little bit more devoted, a little bit more influenced by what they are following, versus a fan just kind of enjoys what's happening, but when push comes to shove, they aren't affected by the life or the success or failure of what they're a fan of. And so as you can see, really last week we talked about how good it is for us to be followers of Jesus, not just fans. What he has for us and who he is should deeply affect who we are and what we find true and what we find good. And so we're kind of picking up today. We said last week we kind of talked about how we're going to talk about two different sides of the coin of being a follower of Jesus. The cost that comes with being a follower of Jesus, and then next week, the joyful freedom that exists in being a follower of Jesus as well. But when I think about cost, I actually think about one of the first purchases that some of you have made, some of you haven't, some of you shouldn't, but you will, and it's sad. It's probably the scariest day for your parents, and it's when you get a car. Just anxiety races through the roof of your parents' household when you come home or you leave the dealership and they watch you pull out and probably run a red light or get honked at immediately. But no, getting a car, I remember getting my first car. It was actually a hand-me-down from my brother. It was a 2003 Nissan Altima. I know, it was great, man. It was great. I had it in 2017? So it was like a 14-year-old car. That was the first time I got my car. That shows my age a little bit. But I always remember I didn't have it very long because I didn't know that you had to change the oil in the car, and so I I cracked the engine and somebody say airball. Yeah. I wasn't a great car owner. I'll be honest. Listen, hand up accountability there. Wasn't my proudest moment. I do remember, funny story about that. My granddad, he was a big handyman at the time, and so he came over to our house every day for like a week and a half, trying to figure out what's wrong with this car. And then finally, he looks and like he starts to feel, and the oil had like hardened, and it was just like goo. It is just, and he looked at me and he goes, "Nate, when's the last time you got an oil change?" And I said, "Oil what?" And he goes, "I know what's wrong with your car. It's dead. It's never happened. Get a new one. That's your fix." So then I got a 2015 Nissan Altima. So I stayed in the Altima family. But I remember that day that was the first time I went to the dealership because the other car was my brother's car that he just gave me, and he got a new one because he got a Mustang. But he loved that thing, so I think he won that trade. But at the end of the day, I remember going to the dealership, and what happens, and if you've been a part of the process, you might know this. If you haven't been a part of the process, at some point you're going to do this. You don't really. There's two ways of going to the dealership. You could just go to a dealership and say, "What's here?" But mostly you kind of go online shopping. You look around, maybe it's Carvana, maybe it's CarMax, maybe it's you just Google these types of cars near me, and then you go, way too expensive, let me get the much lesser version of that. But what you do is you go and so I remember I was like, I want to stay in the Nissan Altima family. I loved that car. And so I looked around and I found one, and it was in a price range. I was like, hey, I think this is affordable. And my parents talked about it, and they're like, we think that we could actually maybe afford this as well. It wouldn't be that much of a loan, and you could probably get a job and work this off and all that fun stuff, right? And we pull up to the dealership, and we're like, we want to look at this Nissan Altima. And then you get there, and then you're looking at the price, and the price changed, and it went up. And then they go, and that's not it. There are fees and other things. And eventually you go, well, why did you lie about the cost at the front? Like, I'm looking at this car thinking, this is what I got to pay. I can do that. And then you come in, you're like, this price just doubled. What happened, right? Because they hide the things. They just want to kind of get you into the door, right? They think if they can get you in the door, they can kind of wheel and deal and kind of help you figure out and maybe find ways to wiggle around to make sure that you're walking out with the car. So they give you this price, and then they don't include, maybe it's an online price, and they tell you that it's changed since then, and then they don't include all the fees, and there's just a bunch of hidden cost alongside that. Why am I telling you this? Just so you can know. So if you ever see a car online, you can go add probably a few grand to that, and then you got the price of the car, right? That's practical wisdom for you. You're welcome. Okay. Tuffy, thank you. No, but the real reason I'm telling you that is I think sometimes, and even if you're honest, maybe your story starts here too, we are introduced to following Jesus the same way. That you're introduced to following Jesus and the cost of following Jesus, and you're told this one thing, but you feel like as you start following Jesus, some things are left out. You feel like it starts to cost more than you bargained for. You start to realize, there's more things that it takes to follow Jesus than I at first thought. I don't want that to be us. I don't want that to be you. I don't want that to be anybody. I don't want anybody lied to or misled about the true cost of following Jesus. Because here's the thing. Here's the first thing I want you to hear tonight. The cost of following Jesus is large. The cost of following Jesus is large, and I don't want anybody to feel like it's not. This may be the first time you're hearing that, and if it is, I'm sorry. I wish somebody would have told you sooner. Following Jesus costs a lot. It's just the truth. There's no way of getting around that, okay? It might cost you a few things. It might cost you friendships. of having to get new friends who are also following Jesus because you don't like the things that your old friends are doing, or if they're honest, they're not liking the way that they feel, just a sense of judgment, even if you're not judging them because they feel wrong about what they're doing. You might and probably will have to sacrifice, and it costs some desires and wants in your life, things that you want to do or desire to do, but you realize I shouldn't, or I can't. If we're honest, it's going to cost popularity in a lot of ways because the things Jesus wants us to be about aren't necessarily popular. In a lot of ways, they're the opposite of that. Can we be honest? It might cost you money. It might cost you money because sometimes it's more profitable in the real world to do things that Jesus isn't about, to kind of scheme. I mean, I think about, we already brought up car salesman, but that's kind of if we're honest, a little bit of a scummy way of making money, in the sense of like, hey, I'm going to give you one price, but it's actually going to be more. But we don't want you to tell you that up front. Now, listen, if any of you have family members that are car salesmen, I'm not calling them scummy. I'm just saying that sense of business that a lot of people use isn't what Jesus is about. He doesn't preach that. He preaches very much vulnerability, right? Can we be honest? Following Jesus could cost you a relationship, could cost you a boyfriend or a girlfriend because you look around going, this relationship isn't the one that Jesus wants me to be in. The things they want to do are not the things Jesus wants me to do. The things that they're about, the things that they find important, the things that are true of them or at the center of who they are, isn't what Jesus tells me needs to be the center of who I am. Can I be honest? Even laziness. Following Jesus tells us to pursue excellence in everything that we do, and laziness is not a part of that. And at the end of the day, what we're seeing, in a lot of ways, following Jesus costs our life. It costs who we are. It redefines who we are. And we come back to the statement that the cost of following Jesus is large. That's heavy, I know, but I promise it gets better, okay? We're not going to leave you there, because you know what's really great is the Bible's not quiet about the cost of following Jesus. Jesus isn't quiet about the cost of following him. He's very pointed, and he tells us about what it looks like. And I love the passage in Mark 8, which is where we're going to be tonight, where he really gives us the cost of following him. Just a little bit of context. What's happened here is Jesus has actually looked at the people following him closely. They were named his disciples. And it says that the disciples, he looked at them and he says, hey, who do you say that I am? Who is really, he goes, who is everybody saying that I am? And he says, Jesus, some people are calling you a prophet. Some people are calling you a great teacher. Some people are calling you a reincarnation of people from the past. And he goes, that's weird, but whatever. But he goes, who do you say I am? You're the ones, in my slang, you're my homies. You're the ones that are like around me. You're my boys. What do you say I am? You're the ones hanging out with me. And one of them speaks up and he goes, I believe you're the Messiah, the one that has come to save us from all this brokenness, the one that has come to be the salvation of all people and all things. And he says, that is good, and that's exactly correct. And from here, and honestly, if we were there, we'd probably say the same thing. We expect him to like float in the air, angels to sing, like, I don't know, like rock music and things to happen. And like, I almost expect that statement to be the statement that leads the armies of angels to take over everything, that makes everything good again. It almost feels like the crescendo moment in the story. But that's not what happens. Jesus actually looks at them and he says, that's great. By the way, things are about to turn for the worse right now. He looks at them and he goes, they're actually going to get really bad really, really quickly. I'm going to be rejected. You're right, I am the Messiah, but people aren't going to like that. They're going to reject me. They're then going to mock me and spit on me, and ultimately, they're going to kill me. I'm going to die. But he says, hey, don't worry. Take heart. You know that I'm the Messiah, and I'm coming back because I'm like that. I'm him, right? If you don't laugh, this is going to be a rough time, guys. I'm just being honest. No, I'm just kidding. Okay. Didn't need that. I'll be honest. Didn't need that. Didn't need that for my self-esteem, but that's okay. We're going to keep pushing on. Oh, wait. Jeremy, this is my time, not your time. No, I'm just kidding. I love that I know exactly what he put up there too. So what happens here? So the same guy, reel it in. I promise we're going to get to that photo in just a moment. That same guy, Peter, who said, hey, you are the Messiah. He then turns around, pulls Jesus aside, and he goes, hey, man, what you said right there, I don't like it. You're wrong. There's no way, Jesus. He basically says, hey, Jesus, shut up. That's what he said to him. And you know what, dude, you know what Jesus he literally looks at Peter and he goes, get behind me, Satan. Get behind me, the devil. You are being the devil right now by speaking against what's about to take place. Now we get to my photo because I believe everybody looked at Jesus this way. That's Peter right here. He's like, I think that guy's name's Theodore, by the way. I don't know. This is a little knowledge for you, so. No, but seriously, it's funny, but man, imagine how awkward that moment is. Imagine the Messiah of all things. All right, you can take it down, Jeremy. It's too much. Imagine the Messiah of all things looks at you and says, get behind me, Satan. Here's Jesus' words of saying, you don't understand the cost of what it takes, A, to be me, and B, to follow me. And now we pick up where Jesus then turns to the whole crowd. And he says this, starting in verse 34. It says, calling to the crowd with him, with the disciples, he said to them, if anyone would come after me, let him deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. For whoever would save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake and the gospel's will save it. Oof. And we're just going from tough to tougher, right? I love how he starts this though. He starts it not by saying Peter. He starts it not by saying disciples. He starts it not by saying those who are close to me. No, he says anybody who would follow me. Meaning, hey, what I'm about to share to you is not for what I would call the super Christians. And you know the super Christians. You can think of a few super Christians. The ones that are doing everything right. The ones that your parents are looking at you saying, why can't you be more like so-and-so? You know what I mean? The super Christians. He's not saying that. He's not saying, hey, those who are deeply devoted to me, those who want to be in my closest posse. He's saying, anybody who wants to follow me, this is what's to come. And then he basically says, you're going to have to do not just what you want to do. You can't live in a way that's just about you. You can't keep walking the walk of, what do I want to do today? How do I want to feel? How do I want to respond? How do I want to be perceived? Like, it's all about me. He's saying, you got to throw that away. That's not what this life is about to be. There's something greater. And then he uses this term, take up your cross and follow me. Many of us, we know this terminology, cross, because we know, and if you don't, it's fine, but the cross was an executionary device used by the Romans. And it basically was a device of pure torture where you would be, your hands and your feet would be punctured on the cross. Then they would break your legs, and basically they would start to fill your lungs with your own blood. It's really excruciating. I don't want to get too much into it, but basically what they would do is they'd make you suffocate in humiliation. Imagine, these people are stripped of their clothes, hung naked up on a cross, where people are laughing at them, shouting at them, spitting on them. And it's because it was supposed to be a mockery and a humiliation, but it was also supposed to be a device of torturing. And so when Jesus is saying this, he's looking at them saying, take up your cross. In other words, you must be ready to take on the suffering, the shame, and the persecution that is going to come with following me. Again, it's tough to hear. Because He's not saying this sense of like, hey, persecution may come, things might happen, and you got to be maybe ready for that. But you can avoid it as much as you want to. No, he's saying don't just kind of meander your way through the Christian life, but take heart in what you believe in. Take heart in the gospel that is true and stand firm in your faith. It was tough for them to hear. It's still tough now. But what I love is he doesn't give us so why should we do this? Because I said so. He gives us the reasoning behind it. He gives us a peek behind the curtain. Pick up in verse 36. It says, "For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world, yet to forfeit his soul? For what can a man give in return for his soul? What does it profit a man to gain the whole world and everything it has to offer, yet forfeit your soul?" There was a comedian back in the day. You've probably heard the name. His name was Robin Williams. Robin Williams, if you didn't know, he was a comedian, but he also was he was the voice of Aladdin. Genie. That's what I said. Don't look at me like I'm wrong. He was the voice of Genie in Aladdin. He did a lot of things. He was in a lot of kids' movies. He was in the first Jumanji, the best Jumanji. And it actually, I was looking it up. I just was curious, how much money did he earn in his movies? And it said that he was estimated to earn at least between $300 and $500 million between all of his movies and things and tours and all the stuff that he did. Why is that important? If you don't know, the story of Robin Williams ends pretty tragically. He actually took his life in 2014. It was a big moment. I remember hearing the news about it. And I remember it was. I was younger at that time, but it was such a he was somebody that kind of bonded families together because he was somebody that parents liked because they thought he was funny, but he was also somebody that kids liked because we also thought he was funny. And so it was just this huge thing that when he passed and that he had taken his own life, and everybody's question on their mind was, why? Do you know why they questioned that? Because of his fame, because of his fortune, because everybody looked at his life saying, that's the life I want. I want to have $300 to $500 million to play with. I want to be on everybody's mind. I want people to want to take pictures with me, even if I don't know them. I want the fame and the fortune and the greatness and the glamour that comes with it. And so when he took his life, people started to question, why? You had everything, Robin. There's another story of an artist, and maybe you've heard of him, maybe you haven't. His name's Bozzy. He's kind of, somebody knew him. You shouldn't. He's not a good artist, but no, he had a song, and it was a song I actually remember was really near and dear to me in high school when it came out, because it was a song that he talked about Jesus in. It was very weird because he was not a guy that would talk about Jesus much. But I always remember, and I always thought about this. He had a moment, and sometimes it wasn't even a song. It was like he was just kind of journaling over a song. And he said these words, and I just thought, wow, how poetic. He said this. This is him. By the way, he is also multimillionaire. I mean, people love him, follow him, and all these things. He's a very, very famous person. This is his words. He said, what's funny is in my whole life, I thought making money and being praised would give me some kind of happiness. And I wanted those things because I was concerned about what everyone else thought of me. I wanted to feel loved. I wanted to feel accepted. And then I realized I could never feel anybody's pain or anybody's happiness. I could only feel mine. And the cars and the house and fame, it never made me feel anything except separated and intoxicated and honestly kind of gross. Don't get me wrong, nice things are fun. I like nice things. But you can't base your human value on them. Because at the end of the day, they don't mean a single thing. If I'm not happy, I'm just a sad guy in a nice car. If I don't have any real friends or family, I'm just a lonely guy and a big house. Why am I telling you this? In a way, I think Bozzy is saying, and what the reality of what Robin Williams was feeling. What can a man give in return for his soul? And what does it profit a man to gain the whole entire world, yet lose his soul? It's another story before we get into the time of closing. I love stories, if you can't tell. It was actually a family, two people named Jim and Elizabeth Elliott. These are probably names you haven't heard of. Jim and Elizabeth Elliott. Jim was a missionary. And what that meant is he felt a calling to not just stay where he was to share the gospel, but to go to places that needed the gospel the most, places that had been unreached and unmet with the gospel of Jesus. And he actually got a heart for a tribe. And this tribe was a very volatile and unreached tribe, meaning they had killed people and they didn't want to be messed with. Yet it was on Jim's heart that they were the very people that he was called to go and share the gospel with. And so him and 4 other missionaries at a young age went and took on that. And young, I mean young family age. And when they got there, they weren't met with welcoming arms and listening ears. They were met with spears and arrows as they all were killed when they arrived. So word gets back as people found out, and Elizabeth and their young child at the time learn of their husband and father being killed by the very people they went to try to introduce the gospel to. And she talks about in a book just kind of the hard times of dealing with that and getting over that. But in that same statement, she looked at it and she said, suffering is never for nothing. Suffering is never for nothing as she's looking at the reality that she'll never have her husband back or get her kid's father back. And the very next step that she took was not to run, was not to shame, but was to go back to the very people who put her husband to death, to which she shared the gospel with them, and many became followers of Jesus. And, as she's doing that, I think there's a statement most likely in her head that her husband had shared, which rings true. He said in one of his journals, the person is no fool who gives what he cannot keep to gain what he cannot lose. I'm going to shorten that quote. Jim says it was all worth it. My life was worth it for their souls. My story, though it ended terribly, was worth it because their story didn't have to. It's very different than the story we see with Robin Williams or Bozzy. And here's what I think it leads us to if I were to put it in a statement. You saw my statement earlier, the cost of following Jesus is large, but here I want to end that statement and kind of finish it because it wasn't over. The cost of following Jesus is large, but the cost of not following him is even larger. Cost of following Jesus, yes, it is large. There are things we have to give up, and that's true, but I'm telling you, the cost of not following him is just that much larger. Listen, you can have everything you want in this world and feel like you're getting all the things that you've asked for. And what's going to happen is if you don't have Jesus, you're just going to keep asking for more. Because at the end of the day, you have a God-sized hole in your heart. And money and friends and popularity and fame and the career that you want and the person you want to marry, all those things, they can be great. They're not going to fill that hole. Bless you. They were never meant to. So where does that lead us? Leads us to, I think, 3 real quick things that I want you to understand, and then we're going to walk out of here, okay? We as Christians need to do these 3 things with this. A, we need to understand the cost. It is time for you not to stop putting that aside. Because here's the truth. The cost of following Jesus is not nothing. There is a cost of following Jesus, and we need to understand that. And once we've understood the cost, we need to accept the cost. if we're going to be followers of Jesus, we cannot understand the cost and then deny it. We have to understand the cost and then accept it. And lastly, once we've done that, we need to follow Jesus in spite of the cost. Once we've understood it and once we've accepted it, it's time to follow Jesus in spite of it. To choose Jesus knowing that though the cost is greater, to not follow him, the cost is greater even more. Because what's on the other side of it? The other side of the cost of following Jesus is the joyful freedom that it brings. And the cost of following Jesus is worth the joyful freedom that it brings. And if you're wondering, Nate, what is the joyful freedom that it brings? I'm so glad you asked. I'll see you next week as we unpack that. Let me pray for us, and then we're going to get out of here.
Thank you for listening. We hope you have a great week and that you are a light for Jesus. Grace and peace.